Russia raises the number of soldiers killed in a Ukrainian strike on New Year's Day to 89. Kyiv warns Moscow will retaliate.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak sets out 5 priorities on the economy, health and migration.
Moscow is blaming soldiers' use of banned phones for allowing the enemy to locate the target in one of the bloodiest attacks in the nearly year-long war in Ukraine. Russia's defense ministry admits 89 of its soldiers died when Ukraine hit a college for conscripts in the occupied Donetsk area shortly after midnight on New Year's Day. While the number of people killed is unverified, it's the largest death toll acknowledged by Russia in the war. Kyiv claims the figure is far higher. President Volodymyr Zelensky warns Russia will respond.
There is no
doubt that the current masters will throw everything they have left and everyone they can muster to turn the tide of the war. We must derail that Russian scenario, and we are getting ready for it. The terrorists must lose. Any attempt offensive they launch must fail.
Будь-яка спроба їхнього нового наступу повинна провалитися.
Moscow has released these images of what it says are strikes in Kramatorsk. The ministry spokesperson says 120 Ukrainian soldiers were killed in the attack. 2 US-made multiple rocket launch systems were also destroyed.
Systemic failures in Russia's fourth-generation apparatus continue to plague personnel capabilities to the detriment of Russian operational capacity in Ukraine, says the Institute for the Study of War. Russia's defense ministry on Wednesday blamed the illegal use of mobile phones by its soldiers for a deadly strike in Russia-occupied Ukrainian city of Makiyivka. Meanwhile, Wagner Group pins blame on Russian Ministry of Defense for stalled Bakhmut campaign in the east of Ukraine. Since the fighting began, most of Bakhmut's pre-war 70,000 population has fled, but the city has been a focus of the Russian campaign for months, and Moscow has thrown huge resources into capturing it. The epicenter of attritional warfare, Bakhmut has very little overall strategic value for Russia. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian troops repelled Russian attacks near Bakhmut itself. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Wagner Group forces launched an assault towards Krasna Hora and are continuing attempts to push north towards Bakhmut from positions near Klishivka, Ozeryanivka and Opytne. Wagner Group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin stated that Wagner's offensive operations in Bakhmut are highly attritional because each house in Bakhmut is, quote, a fortress, and that Ukrainians have defensive lines every 10 meters. Now, this is a significant inflection for Prigozhin and the first time that he has framed Wagner forces in Bakhmut as making effectively no gains, according to the Institute for the Study of War. Prigozhin previously stated in October that Wagner forces operating in the Bakhmut area advance 100-200 meters a day. Prigozhin's attempts to justify the Wagner Group's lack of progress in Bakhmut partially supports the Institute for the Study of War assessment that Russian forces in Bakhmut are culminating.
Recently described as 250 grams of magic and perfection by France's president, the baguette is also at risk from surging energy prices crippling Europe. Some bakers say they can no longer afford to fire up their ovens, and sharp hikes in the price of butter, flour and sugar are also taking a toll. The French government is rushing to save traditional bakeries from closing, with the economy minister announcing a survival package to help tens of thousands of bakers.
The 3 aids which the 33,000 bakers in France are currently entitled to are a financial aid window, a 20% discount with the shock absorber, and a deferral of payment of social security contributions and taxes.
The state will not let its bakers down. That's the message from politicians. Meanwhile, cutthroat competition from supermarkets means bakeries are unable to pass on major price increases to customers.
Billionaire Andrej Babis, seen here on the left, returned to court in Prague today as the new year saw the resumption of his trial for fraud. The former Prime Minister of the Czech Republic has been accused of a €2 million fraud related to EU small business funds used to help finance construction of the Stork's Nest Conference Centre outside Prague. He denies covering up his Agrofert conglomerate's interest in the scheme. The trial comes as the 68-year-old is preparing to run for the presidency. 4 days into the new year, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced his resolutions, 5 priorities for the year ahead.
We will halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the boats. Those are the people's priorities. They are your government's priorities, and we will either have achieved them or not. No tricks, no ambiguity. We're either delivering for you or we're not.
Mr Sunak called for a change in national mindset, but with ongoing industrial unrest and economists warning of recession, the UK may require more than positive thinking to deliver Rishi's wish list.
It's been a miserable New Year return to work for commuters in the UK, facing 5 days of rail strikes this week. Around half of the UK's rail lines are closed and only 1/5 of services are running. Some 40,000 members of the National Rail Train Drivers Union are leading the charge and are taking industrial action again over pay, jobs, working conditions and the worst cost of living crisis in a generation. Transport Secretary Mark Harbour has renewed his calls to union members to stop the strikes and return to the negotiating table. But the head of RMT, Mick Lynch, says his members are striking because the government refuses to pay in line with inflation. But that's not all. Bus drivers, traffic officers, ambulance staff, nurses, driving examiners, civil servants and Scottish teachers are all launching strike action in January and February. Nevertheless, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has pledged to fight calls for inflation-busting rises, insisting the government must stick to more modest increases for public sector workers. More stoppages are planned later this year.
Blunt Rochester.
History has been made for the wrong reasons on Capitol Hill. The House of Representatives was adjourned without a speaker on Tuesday night, the first time since 1923 they had failed to choose a leader after a first-round vote. The start of a new Congress was supposed to be a victory lap for the Republican Party. Instead, its leader, Kevin McCarthy, failed 3 times in his bid to be elected.
No person having received the majority of the whole number of votes cast by surname, a speaker has not been elected.
McCarthy is still the leading candidate to replace Democrat Nancy Pelosi, who stood down in November. He says he is not giving up and will battle for as long as it takes to overcome a group of Trump-supporting hardliners who refuse to give him their votes.
We all came here to get things done.
The role of Speaker is one of the most important jobs in US politics. The House will keep voting until a candidate is elected. But after more than 5 hours of speeches and voting, members agreed to try again on Wednesday. The chamber cannot proceed with any other business until they have chosen a speaker.
See how she leans her cheek.
The 2 lead actors of Franco Zeffirelli's 1968 version of Romeo and Juliet are suing Paramount Pictures over a nude scene as it was filmed when they were teens. Olivia Hussey was 15 at the time and Leonard Whiting 16. They are now 71 and 72 respectively. They're alleging sexual abuse, sexual harassment and fraud at the court in Los Angeles and are seeking the equivalent of more than €500 million in damages. It's alleged the director Zeffirelli initially told the young actors they would wear flesh-coloured undergarments for the scene, but ultimately filmed them partially naked at the time of the shoot without their knowledge. Zeffirelli, who died in 2019, is also said to have told them that the film would fail without the nude scene. Their lawyers say the scene was in violation of Californian and federal laws against indecency and the exploitation of children.